David, we're going to be talking about teams today. What is the aha moment that you would most hope our listeners will get from our conversation?
So if they finish hearing this and they say, do you know what? I can see both those types of teams operating in my organisation. I get it. That would be a fantastic outcome for me. Just raising the awareness that not all teams should be treated the same.
Hello, our guest today is David Kesby, founder of Organisational Coaching Hub, a coaching firm that specialises in the phenomenon of extra-dependent teams. Hold that thought, and works with organisations to help teams and coaches learn to lead. With over 10 years working as an executive and team coach, David has now dedicated his career to exploring and explaining two very different types of team. Interdependent teams who work together to achieve a common goal, and extra-dependent teams who are learning together to develop a common practice. By drawing attention to these fundamentally different types of team, David is teaching organisations, and in fact other coaches and consultants, the importance of recognising and celebrating similarity as well as difference. I'm Robert Digings, and this is Highly Relational, the podcast about creating, leading and developing great teams at work, along with all the opportunities and challenges of bringing people together to do their best work. We have one simple aim: to help you create incredible teams across your business, or if you're a coach or consultant, to support you in thinking in new and useful ways for your clients. In our conversation today, David discusses why you need to ask if a team with a capital T actually teams. Just because you have direct line reports doesn't mean you team together naturally, and how being vulnerable in communities of practice leads to everyone raising their game. We know that a team should be more than the sum of its parts. In other words, something special happens in the mix that creates better results or greater innovation than just a group of individuals could achieve. But what if there were in fact two distinct types of team that not only function differently, achieve different outcomes, and more importantly, need to have a different ethos and even leadership approach in order to succeed? For David Kesby, this has become all too apparent, and he's coined two phrases to describe them: interdependent and extra-dependent. I started our conversation by asking him how come this has been lying in plain sight all this time, two completely different types of team.
I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know. How I got to it was studying both conventional teaming and also communities of practice, and experiencing both of those as meaningful, developmental, synergistic experiences where the together generated more than the individual effort. And by the time I'd started to recognise this as actual teams in organisations, I was a convert to both, and so I was perfectly happy to see both. I mentioned this in the book, is that there's lots of people talking about teams, and they typically go from, well, are you a group or are you a team, which is a leading question because they want them to be a team, and they think they're a group. And so that how do you move from a group to a team? You work together to achieve a common goal. That's the conventional conclusion as what is a team, definition of a team. But if you recognise that some groups don't behave like teams and yet still generate great outcomes, then what are they? And I think that too often people try to apply the team word and the team solution to anything where there's people together involved. And here's another example I've used with before with certain people. So imagine, hunting for fish or hunting for mammoth. Okay, hundreds of thousands of years ago. If you were hunting a woolly mammoth, you would be people at the front trying to sort of attract it to a particular place. They would try and get it into corner it. There'd be people behind pushing it. So everyone had a different role. If one of them messed up, the mammoth would get away, and everyone would feel the consequences of it. So it's a common goal to hunt the mammoth for the benefit of everybody. But if you compare that with, say, line fishing, or even single net fishing, you have a load of people on, and they're just fishing for their family, for instance. So they fish with a net, single net, on their own, and some people catch fish and others don't. The consequences of those efforts are individually experienced. However, if you all get together beforehand or afterwards, especially afterwards, and say, look, how was your fishing? Well, I did this, and where did you throw your net? Well, I threw it the other side of the river because, or I waded into the river, or never thought of wading into the river. Perhaps I can do that. It doesn't really affect anybody else too much, so long as it's sustainable fishing, of course. But and so everybody can feed their family, and that's a different type of team. People don't think of it as a team, I don't think. Or if they do, they then don't recognise the mammoth example as different, or they all assume it's the same thing because they want team to be the answer, and for this common goal, well, they'll argue the case about how the common goal is achieved. But I think in those two sort of semi-fictitious examples, right from the word go, we as a human species have been combining together differently in order to achieve things, but the way we combine together is done differently.
And the difference you have named interdependent and extra-dependent. And in some ways, it's the extra-dependent team that doesn't, if I've understood correctly, doesn't probably get noticed enough, which in your example there is the line fishing or the net fishing.
Yeah.
So tell us about how these two teams function differently in an organisation as opposed to how we might have been doing it for food thousands of years ago. What would an extra-dependent team look like in an organisation, and what would an interdependent team look like?
And I'm going to roll it back slightly because when we think about teams with the capital T, team, the name team is typically associated with somebody who's line managing direct reports. So it's a structure within the organisation that is called a team. And then there's a question, does it actually team or not? Okay. And so first of all, too often our experience of what we're naming as teams, when it's not on a sports field, for instance, is being given to us as something to do with line management and that sort of thing and reporting, which of course has got nothing to do with actual teaming because it's about output, not who do you report to.
So that's the first thing of note then, that just because you're a direct report of somebody who has a number of direct reports and you might be called a team, you're not necessarily a team. You happen to have the same line manager.
Yes. And if there's an aha moment that people could walk away with, in addition to any other they might have, it's to say, look, just because you have line reports does not mean that you team together naturally. So back to the prehistoric sort of experiences, they're natural, they're phenomenologically experienced. They happen. Nobody's organising it. Nobody's creating that. Nobody's put some kind of charter together and said, this is how we're going to do it. It just happens because the circumstances and the task at hand and the output that's needed generate those sorts of combinations of people. And in our sort of conventional organisations with these line management structures around accountability, they don't necessarily lead to proper teaming. So for a line manager or even a team member, sometimes you might be teaming with other people in your line managed team, but not others. That's okay. And you might be teaming with people who are line managed by somebody else, and that's okay. And as a line manager, you might be in charge of 2 or 3 different teams at the same time. And if you understand how they team, you can understand how you can lead rather than manage that team.
So organisational structure does not tell us where the teams or who the teams are.
No. But this is so systems thinking and that school of thought and activity and practice is really fundamental in appreciating how organisations go about their work. Not organise, but go about their work and create things and actually deliver and produce and create value. So teams create value in some shape or form. Individuals create value, of course, but the togetherness, the collaboration is a team, and that creates value. Before we get to the interdependent and the extradependent team, we've got to recognise that there's this thing that people call teams in organisations that aren't really teams, though people call them teams, and that's the line management. They may or may not be teams.
And you use the word teaming. So what do you mean by that?
It's the activity of collaboration. And so I think that teaming happens within a structured team, and it happens beyond it as well. And you don't need a line manager to team. So if we are leaders in organisations, or we have some kind of responsibility for supporting teaming or teams in organisations, then we've got to look out for how those combinations happen. Who's working with who isn't working with who, and that sort of thing. And that allows us, and Agile is good at this, as to breaking down the sort of barriers and stuff, though they can, in some ways, they sort of recreate other ones, and that where that works, that's really great, and where it doesn't, it's just ticking the box a bit. Get on to the extra-dependent team. Where I noticed that was where an organisation had put a bunch of people together who all did the same thing, but when they're doing that thing, they don't work with each other. And I discovered it because I was in a team that did exactly that. So I was a consultant in an organisation providing services to organisations, developmental people development and team development, ironically team development. And we had a team development day, and they said, and we decided we weren't a team, ironically. And there was lots of rah, because are we a group or are we a team? And in the end, we all agreed we weren't a team. But on the way home, I reflected and I said, we aren't a team. We're a community of practice. And that's okay, because I've been in a community of practice before, and it was a really great experience. So let's understand that we're a community of practice rather than a conventional team.
And you were a community of practice because, a bit like the net fishermen,
yeah,
you were all doing the same thing,
yeah.
But when you did it on your own.
Yes. So we did it on our own compared to the others in the team. What we didn't do is we didn't just do it on our own, like the fishermen. So what we were doing, we were teaming with our clients. They needed us, we needed them. Together, we had a common goal. It was much more, in my view, is much more than just a case of saying, well, we're a service and they're a customer. If we were going to do really intimate relational work, we were going to work together. We were going to need each other. We were going to really engage in something together that only our unique combination could create. That's teaming in my book. Doesn't matter who your line management is or what your cost structure is or whatever it might be. For good interdependency, that's us teaming. For an extra dependent team to exist, members are in interdependent teams. So individually, typically they're in an interdependent team, possibly one, probably multiple ones. So I've worked, for instance, with risk managers and who were like regional risk managers, and they were providing risk management processes to a region. And so they needed to be the risk person, expert, bring that difference, that capability to a leadership team who had all the other conventional sort of C-suite type of skill sets. But they were the risk people working with the finance people and the ops people and all the rest of it.
And they were teaming with those people.
And they needed to interdependently team with those people. But back at home, as it were, they were just one of, in this case, eight other risk managers. And when they teamed together there, they didn't need each other because they had everything they needed. They couldn't help each other out because every time they helped each other out, they were sort of taking away from their job they were there to do. So there was a tension to bind themselves outside the team. And this is where I came up with the notion of extra dependent teams, because it's not they have extra dependency, they need more dependency. It's that the dependency is outside the team rather than interdependency, which is inside the team. So if you understand what interdependency is about, then it's interdependent. It's inside the team. We all need each other. We're mutually accountable here. If everyone doesn't collaborate and somebody doesn't do their part in it, we're going to suffer. We're all going to feel the consequences, even up to failure, a bit like the mammoth getting away type thing. We're all going to feel the effects. So let's all help each other to play our part. That takes a bit of disagreement. It takes an awful lot of trust. It takes a lot of understanding of each other and able to represent each other's points of view. But everybody's bringing something different to that collaboration. That's a very different technique than when I had all these risk managers and they were trying to work out what their common goal was, because really their common goal, they didn't have a common goal. Their own line manager had a remit to cover the whole country, but nobody else in the team had the remit to cover the whole country. They had the remit to cover their regions.
And the success of their ability to do that within their region was not dependent on other people's regions.
No.
So one region could be hugely successful and that didn't rub off on the others. It rubbed off on the line manager because it meant that one element of the national coverage was going well. And so that's where there isn't the interdependency and hence the name extra dependent.
Exactly.
But are they, one thing that I'm not clear on from what you've said so far is, are they a team or not? So I know you refer to them as an extra dependent team, but you're also saying they're a community of practice. In other words, they all have the same, they're all developing or attempting to develop the same expertise. But can they come together in a way that we would say is a meaningful team?
So that's my desire, is that people, I've seen teams too often struggle with trying to find this common goal. Most extra dependent teams will have a purpose, but it's not a goal to achieve because they never achieve their goal. There's nothing, because it's about a standard. They're bringing a standard of practice to bear on all of those, the rest of the organisation that they serve. How does risk managers bring a really great level of risk management to their region, for instance? And so this is, and think of it as a common practice. We all do risk management here in our own particular way, because this is the way that risk management needs to happen in this organisation with these people we're supporting. So it's a unique but common practice that is iterated and explored and discovered and rediscovered. And it means that mistakes and successes are equally beneficial to everyone in the team. So how they team, how they get that sort of camaraderie is really powerful because they share an identity. We are professionals in our risk management field. I've worked with matrons. I've worked with financial crime prevention in banks. I've worked with vicars. I've worked with all sorts of different professions, and it's a really, really strong bond of identity that a team has, and they really want to team, and they find it really difficult to. They want to team, but if you then apply the conventional team of everyone is mutually accountable here, it doesn't work. It doesn't feel honest, and so as soon as we start to recognise it for what it is, and then you say, and that's okay, let's recognise that that there's individual accountability, not mutual accountability. But do you know what? There's huge benefit in us sharing our practice with each other, because we're raising the bar collectively, and our combined reputation are like a combined identity, but reputationally we're all benefiting from that.
Yes. So the immediate place where I can go, where I experience that, because of working in the way that I do, I'm not part of a big organisational structure, would be my supervision group.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm part of a closed supervision group for my practice, for my consultancy practice and the coaching and facilitation work that I do. There are 4 of us who all do that kind of work, and we meet together with a supervisor.
Yes.
And there's very strong bonds. I gain an enormous amount from spending a day in that group. And I could say we're a team, but we absolutely don't have any shared outcome apart from supporting each other in being better at what we do. But that's hugely valuable.
Hugely valuable. You feel it.
Yes.
And so, and you know in your practitioner world that you're supervised in that it's not quite the same teaming that you do out there when you're doing your work, but it's definitely something that's beneficial. And I think there's lots of teams out there that don't recognise the difference, but there's so in coaching and consulting, there's supervision groups, which we do as part of the course. It's part of our professionalism. And there's loads of practitioners out there that don't do that. They just do CPD and they're still working individually in their own sort of professional columns, as it were. But really, if you go to a conference, you start to experience the identity benefits of the togetherness. And then in a supervision group, if I can ask some questions about that experience, how trustworthy is your supervision group? What's it feeling like from a trust point of view?
Extraordinarily high. We've been meeting now as a closed group for 4 years, and we meet for a whole day. So that the level, the quality of the interpersonal relationships in that group, or in your language, in that extra dependent team, is very, very high. And I feel enormously privileged to be in the group.
What benefits do you gain from it?
All sorts of personal and professional benefits. So it's a really safe place where I can take and show up as myself. I can bring client work into the space.
Yes.
I can bring things that have gone wrong, or that aren't going well, or that I'm confused or worried about. I can bring successes of things that have happened and extraordinary shifts that occurred that I wasn't expecting. I learn from what the other people in the group share about their experiences of doing that profession, attempting to do that profession well. And we're guided by a supervisor who isn't they're not a direct report in an organisational structure way, but we are led by somebody who provides structure and oversight.
And leadership is the word that I'm hearing. Yeah. In a different way than you might otherwise experience, but still you experience it as leadership.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I would expect stories that you share and experiences you share, you take on board, and you are better prepared for your own client experience because of the collective storytelling and exchange and sharing of practice that you've exchanged in those sessions.
I would go even further. I would say my work is held. My professional work is somehow held by that supervision group. So my clients benefit, even though they've never met them.
Right.
In the moment that I'm delivering it, my supervision group are behind me and my practice.
Right. And that's powerful.
Yes.
So imagine that was taken into organisations, because it isn't. None of that's taken into organisations, into teams of similarity. Teams of similarity try to behave like teams of difference because they start to notice everybody does a different thing. They're in different places. But actually they're doing the same thing. But what they don't do is when they meet, they don't show up as their true self, warts and all, because and they don't share their mistakes, and that's because the levels of trust aren't sufficient to show up with your mistake. But leaders who create great places for people in these types of teams to flourish, call them extra dependent teams or whatever you like, I don't mind, but recognize that the team comes together because of their similarity. We're all doing roughly the same thing in our own particular way, in our own particular places, but coming together regularly for some really great exchange time for each other, with each other, because of each other, then we are enriched through that process.
Brilliant word,
Yeah?
enriched. Yes,
Yeah.
In all ways,
In all
personally
ways,
and professionally.
So it isn't just the
technically.
task, exactly, and you're better prepared to do better work out with your clients. I call this combined capability, okay? And it is everything in the practice, and the practice I call skills, bills, spills and thrills, okay? Because it rhymes. But skills are your skill set. But it's also knowledge and understanding and everything to do with that. I'm trying to find an easy way to encapture the full extent of what's in a practice. Bills are the things you buy. So it's how you dress, it's the equipment you use, it's the software you use. And the practice will share or have degrees of difference or similarity in that, in what they're doing. And you'll compare notes, how do you do this, or how do you do that keystroke, or how do you fill in that form? That's all part of that shared practice. And then you get thrills and spills, which are the stories, the heroes, the villains, the myths, the legends, which are cultural sort of artifacts, really. And those stories it's the spills and the thrills. The mistakes are so important to share so that everyone else knows what not to do as much as what to do. And there's vulnerability in sharing your mistake or where you went wrong, or I nearly fell into this elephant trap, or whatever it might be. So if leaders can create the conditions for that exchange to happen in their meetings and their regular meetings, then that will be enriching. Sadly, in all the meetings that I've met, but typically what happens is they say, right, let's hear an update from everyone. And let's see if anyone wants any help. So the answer is always the same in my experience. They go around the table, they give an update of everything. They positioned their answer in a way that says, I'm great, aren't I? Okay. Or if it's not me, it's them over there that makes it difficult for me. By the time we've gone around the table, they're fully armoured because they've not owned up to anything that's problematic. And then say, do you want any help? Do you know what their answer is? No. Because why would I want any help? Otherwise, I'm showing myself to be weak. So all of a sudden, we're in a transactional exchange on task. There's none of the personal side of things. There's none of the deep understanding, appreciation, the sort of thing that happens in your supervision sessions. Or the building of the common identity, because we're all doing different things and we're coming together. And then when they might do something, might work together on a task or a strategy or something like that. And there's some interdependency on that. But the thing that's missing is the thing that you just described in your supervision, which is amazing. It's just that no leaders just don't know that sort of thing is there. It's powerful. That can make a difference.
And say more about the importance of similarity. I think I've understood that your part of your proposition is that difference is celebrated and noticed much more easily.
Yeah.
The difference is like, bring something different. What we've got to do here is hear our differences. Whereas there's part of what you're drawing attention to is similarity and the value of it.
Yes. So there's a number of different angles to think about this. We are in our world, we're encouraged to think about difference and diversity, and that's a major and important agenda. And there's lots of research done in teams that demonstrated that a diverse team is better than a non-diverse team. Absolutely. So when it comes to, those gender and race and religion and
social background,
all of that, anything like that.
Yep.
It's all, diversity is definitely there, okay, no matter what team. But that shouldn't be where the That's not the end of it, because if you could get 8 random people from around the globe, put them into a room and say you're a team, and hope that diversity would gel them together. And it doesn't. Why not? Because they're not working together and they don't know their common goal. So there's a diversity in what they do together that's really important in an interdependent team. In an extra-dependent team, their similarity is what they do, not together, but separately. You're consulting, for instance, my team coaching. But it's not noticed, apart from, okay, they all do the same thing. Let's give Charlie or Sam all of the people who do that. Yeah. And so they are structured in organizations, but the similarity isn't celebrated and utilized. And I think that part of that, this is something that's emerged in my thinking over the last year or two, is that there's a lot of psychology in our world, and psychology is at an individual level. But psychology is only one school that helps to explain how people get on together, right? Mm-hmm. And communities of practice, for instance, comes from a anthropological school of thought. So anthropology, which is about societies and peoples, looks at an individual, but only in the context of the society. Sociology will do the same thing. Psychology, too often, looks at the individual in the context of other individuals. I've gravitated towards social identity theory, which is a branch of psychology, but it focuses on and explicitly focuses on the we, not the me. And the identity is created through a comparison between me and other people. And it's about the in-group and the out-group. Am I part of this or am I not? So this is where I started to recognize that the identity is a really amazingly strong glue for people. Even if they don't notice it, it can be a really great glue. Even better for leaders and team members to actually start to say, well, this is a really great glue, let's do more with it. What can we do? And so social identity theory and communities of practice, one coming from a social sort of psychology point of view and the other one coming from an anthropological point of view, say, what's our togetherness? We're looking at something together now. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why similarity just hasn't been noted.
Are there a lot of extra-dependent teams in organisations?
Many years ago, when I was researching the book, I thought, well, let's test this out. We went through it, and I was amazed. 2 out of 3 that I researched in this method came out with a significant minority, but only just a minority, 40%, that sort of area. And 1 came out with a majority of extra-dependent teams. And even the interdependent teams were much smaller than the extra-dependent teams. So if you look at banks, you look at transportation, you look at public sector, private sector, it doesn't matter which organisation. It doesn't take long for extra-dependent teams to be seen and to be found if you're looking for them.
So the learning here is around, in organisations, there are a lot of teams that don't fit what we might superficially define as a team, who are there's a lot of different expertise in each individual coming together to achieve a common goal, where they either do that together or they don't. They either kind of succeed together or fail together. There are an awful lot of teams that are more community of practices, to use that phrase, or in your language, extra-dependent teams of similarity. Yeah. Although, of course, there's about, as you were describing that, and I was thinking of my supervision group, we are all very different people. So there is, of course, they're not. It's not a group of 4 Robert Diggings. There is difference. But the reason for us coming together isn't that difference. The reason for us coming together is the similarity of our shared practice.
Which is why I define an extra-dependent team as people coming together to develop a common practice, because that's effectively what you're doing in that supervision group. You're developing and increasingly common, but it will always be individualized because you express it individually and you apply it individually. But the more you apply that and more intimate you're doing it, the more likely you're going to be actually to identify and share that practice.
Those in a leadership role or in a team listening to our conversation now in an organisation, if everybody in their team does a different job, so as you said, somebody's responsible for finance, somebody else is perhaps responsible for operations, somebody's doing numbers or HR or whatever, then that is a more of an obvious kind of team that we recognise, and there is a shared goal which will be something to do with the delivery of some promises to do with whatever that team exists for. If you're listening to us now and you're in a team where everybody is doing the same thing, so a sales team, you're all doing sales, you're all doing HR, you're all doing accountancy of some level.
Sort of, yeah.
Then we're heading towards this other idea of an extra dependent team, where there isn't the interdependence isn't within the team itself. It's within those people are likely to be on interdependent teams. Each person is on a different one.
Yes.
What is it? So having noticed that, fantastic. And thank you for coming and telling us about it, because my aha moment was a few months ago when we first spoke, and you said, well, this is what I do, and I've got this whole thing going on with this different type of team. And I was like, wow, why have I not...
Well, you asked me that.
I know. It's like, why have I not... Why has nobody told me this? Honestly, why has nobody ever told me this before?
Yes.
So what do you do about it? For those people that are listening now and going, oh my goodness, I am a leader of a community of practice, because everybody who reports to me or when I get together, we're all doing the same thing. We're all HR professionals, or we're all accountants, or we're all sales. We're all delivering sales in different parts of the country.
Yeah. My ultimate purpose in my life is I believe everyone deserves to be led well. Okay, so if you're a leader listening to this, then I'd invite you with this understanding to lead well. That's it. The first effect I'd like the people to have is to relax, because appreciating that this thing exists and it's not weird and it's not out of kilter and it's not wrong or anything like that.
And from what you've said, it's not unusual.
And it's not at all unusual. It really isn't unusual. Actually, having high-performing interdependent teams is the unusual thing, typically because they're more bland and blandified. So one of the things I learned from having learnt about extra-dependent teams was then, I see how interdependent teams need to work. We have to fine-tune them in people's differences and their accountabilities, the individual efforts within that team, and to help build a team where they actually rely on each other rather than just get on and do things on their own.
Can extra-dependent teams be high-performing?
I think so.
What would that look like?
Well, I think you've described it, which is why I was asking those questions earlier in your supervision group. Of course, it's not a line-managed team, but I think that that combination, the way you described it, leads individuals, everyone individually, to raise their game. So imagine you've got a team. What people describe synergy as 1 + 1 + 1 = 9 type of thing. I remember Professor Peter Hawkins saying it's not the ones that you want to pay attention to, it's the plus. How is the plus happening? Because the individuals don't change. It's the combination process. So in the interdependency, it's the way that they rely on each other. In the extra dependency is the way that they share their practice. In an interdependent team, you specialize on your thing you're strongest at, and nobody else needs to do that because you rely on them. In an extra dependent team, you share that strength. It's completely the opposite. Why would you share that strength? Because everybody is stronger. If we both exchange our strengths, then I'm going to raise the bar, and we're all going to raise the bar significantly.
Which, going back to the very beginning, is the, you've got a lot more fish than I caught.
Exactly.
How did you do it? Oh, I went over there, I waded in, and underneath
exactly.
that tree, there's a lot of... Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So if you're in a sales team and you say, I'm going to drive performance because I'm going to have competition, it's a zero-sum game. You create people who don't share. They might help each other out if push comes to shove, but they're not going to tell them their tricks. They're not going to tell them the shortcuts. They're not going to tell things like that. And they're just going to compete with each other. Now, I've talked to sales teams in the past and offered this, and they're not interested because it just doesn't fit with the culture of sales.
So I get the different cultural feels, and sales has a different feel than accountancy would, or that Vickers would, to pick up one of the other teams that you've worked with.
But the dynamics, it's most extreme in sales, but the same thing happens. It was happening in the risk team. It was happening in the Vickers team. Everyone, even in the matrons team that I was working in.
So what do you do to move away from how you described it earlier, the kind of the thing that you don't want an extra dependent team to do, which is everyone basically say, aren't I brilliant? And no, I don't need any help. How does a leader move that team into a place of greater vulnerability and honesty around the skills, the shares, the thrills,
and the sharing of their practice?
How do you do that?
When I talk to extra dependent teams about this, the first thing I say, try this exercise, and it's a simple exercise. In the next team meeting, don't do your accountability. Don't say, what have you been up to in the last month or whatever it might be. Say, one thing I've been successful in is this. And you go around the room, and they don't just share it. The rest of the team, you invite the rest of the team to ask questions. What made you successful? What did you do? How did it happen? Blah, blah, blah. It's the questioning of that draws out. So it's a two-way exchange that's going on in that sharing of the repertoire. You start with a success because it's easier to share. It's still vulnerable, but it's a lower risk. And in time, you turn into what went wrong. Next time, or in 3 or 4 months' time, when you feel like the team is getting into this, you say, let's turn to the thing that you felt like you really messed up. Let's start with that one. Now, of course, when you're sharing this, everybody's sharing an insight on their own work in their own way. You said earlier in your supervision, you bring your client work to it. It's amazing. That's exactly what I would encourage extra dependent teams to do. Bring your client work. Bring your interdependent team stuff into the room and say, look, I'm trying to do this risk management. I'm trying to do this, and my team isn't buying it, or they're overriding me, or things like that. Yes, how do I exactly
and what the conflict is, and what they say when I say.
What do I do if you were in my shoes? What would you do? Yeah,
brilliant.
Well, I do this and I do that, or have you tried this? And there's a. Action learning sets are another really great example. They've been around since the Second World War. There's nothing new about them, but they are incredibly powerful, and they are completely underutilized as a method. But that's what I'm encouraging people. Just share your practice. Invite each other to ask questions, explore together, share your own personal experience in a similar challenge, invite options, but ultimately that other person has to take that away and do it for themselves. So long as it fits within the auspices of your standards, it can't go below standard, it can go above standard. Or you may say, well, we're going to pilot something. You go away on our behalf, go away and try this. Tell us what the result is, and then see if we all want to do it. So you can iterate your practice through real experience and improve altogether. And a leader can do that. Lots of different ways.
And the leader benefits here, don't they?
Oh,
because
totally.
As you've said, that the individuals benefit in what they then take to the clients that they're working with, the teams potentially that, as you've said, that they're working with. But the leader benefits because of the raising of the standard.
And the reputation. So the people who are their customers, as it were, their users of their team members, they experience a really positive reputational uplift, because they would see everyone from that team must all be the same. So whether they are or not, okay, the standard of risk management, for instance, coming out of that team is exemplified by the individual that I experience. So if it's not like that, it should be like that with everyone. Why would I get a bad one or the best one, or whatever it might be? So that is a reputationally example through that one individual.
You've already beautifully shared an idea about how a leader or what could happen in the team. So we're running out of time, David, but I have two questions that I'd like to ask you to complete our conversation, which is, the first one is about the leader.
Yes.
So if somebody listening to this now they've now realised, or maybe they realised before, but certainly it's been confirmed to them through our conversation that they lead an extra dependent team, a community of practice. What shift is it that they need to make in their own thinking about being a leader that would be different if they were leading an interdependent team?
In an interdependent team, you want to say, what is my unique role as the leader here? In an extra dependent team, one of the things to do is to make sure that you are one of them, that you're one. In fact, I'd say it's one of us. Okay. So you have to identify as a risk manager, or as a vicar, or as a nurse, or as a doctor. Otherwise, it's really difficult to engage in the team. So
you are part of the community of practice.
So you are a member.
You
may be peripheral if you know nothing. If you've been parachuted in and you come from a different area, but your difference, you have to drop your difference and start to identify as one of that membership community, the in group. You need to be part of the in group. Okay, so identify as one of us, and start doing it for us. So then you start to say you're championing the cause of what we're about, the standards, how we go about our work, that we're really great. But you're also championing the application of it into the organisation. So you aren't a team leader. This is one of the lovely things. Everybody who's an extra dependent team leader has the opportunity for strategic influence, because everybody in that team takes their value out and creates it outside the team. So straight away you have a strategic effect. It doesn't matter, even if you're in charge of receptionists. You have a massive ability to have a strategic effect. As a leader, identifying and championing that, and recognizing that you aren't leading just the team, you're actually leading the organisation in your own particular way, within the system, and that has an effect on people both inside and outside the organisation. So. And it's an incredibly powerful, exciting place to be when you start to look at it like that. You're not in a corner somewhere, in a cupboard, in a darkened corner, trying to, we're in charge of health and safety and nobody listens to us, right? You're actually a team of health and safety experts making a real difference to the way that this organisation works and delivers things for their customers safely.
Fantastic, thank you. The last question is about coaches or consultants who are listening to us today, who have now got a different way of framing the different types of team that they work with. Is there anything that you would say to them about how they might approach working with an interdependent team as opposed to an extra dependent team? Or actually more the other way round, for those of them that have just realised, for those consultants or trainers, coaches listening who suddenly realise that, yes, actually several of my clients are extra dependent teams. What does that mean about how they might approach their work with them?
I think the nuanced difference is worth spending time getting your head around. I don't mind what you call it at the end of the day, but the phenomenon of similarity versus the phenomenon of difference is the thing to start to notice, even in a team where it's mixed. So you have everyone has got a different role except for two who have the same role. And all of a sudden, the dynamics of similarity start to play into that team. So if you don't have a pure difference team, interdependent, or you don't have a pure extra dependent team where similarity, sometimes you can have a mix. And we talked about briefly before about a C-suite, which actually operates at both levels. At one level, they are uniquely different: executive, finance, risk, HR, whatever it might be. And then at the same level, at a different level, they're all chiefs. And what is it to be a chief in this organisation? And I think that any competitiveness that comes into a team at C-suite level comes from the chiefing thing rather than the difference. And so it's a really important dynamic to notice and to pay attention to, because it turns up and can explain. And if it can explain something really easily, suddenly you have new choices. And if you have new choices, you get new solutions.
David, we're out of time, but it's been terrific talking to you, and the distinction that you've made around these two hugely different, but nonetheless very common and important ways that people come together, that you call interdependent and extra dependent, and the importance of noticing similarity just as much as difference is really, really brilliant. And it's been great to talk to you. So thank you.
No, thank you very much.
The extra dependent David Kesby, thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us today. To find out more about David's work, head to organisationalcoachinghub.com or try his book, Extra Dependent Teams, Realising the Power of Similarity, published by Routledge. You've been listening to Highly Relational. Check out our show notes for more information about today's guest and the topics covered. We do hope you're enjoying these conversations and getting value from them, so do let us know what you think wherever you're listening or watching, and feel free to follow me on LinkedIn to join in the online conversation. And of course, there's no better way to support what we're doing than by subscribing. It really does make a huge difference as to who gets to hear about what we're doing. I'd like to thank today's studio engineer at VoxPod Studios, Alex Bennett. Post-production is by Sean Lawson and the series producer is Ella Halsell. I'm Robert Diggings. Thanks for listening and bye-bye.